You guys should still be able to hear me too. Alright, so I'm just gonna have to turn it up. Okay, cool. Alright, so I guess I'll just proceed as planned with my presentation here, and then I'll just turn it up, and if it's not loud enough, we'll just have to do it again sometime. Alright, and I'll just try to fill you guys in. So what we're going to be talking about today, as I listed... Oh, hang on a second, I can hear myself, and that's not going to do at all for me. Sounds like it is coming through, but just not very loud, so... Alright, that's better. Okay, guys. Bear with me here. Okay, so, as I said, I'm going to be talking... if you guys read the description... well, first I want to say hi to everybody, and I want to give some shout-outs. Should probably do that. I'm going to be showing some videos today and some clips, and I want you guys to remember that that you should go and check. I'm just going to be showing parts of videos and stuff, so I want you to go and check out the whole video, the whole article, whatever it is. Watch and read it, and make sure you support those people. Make sure you support me. That's really easy to do. I'm going to put a link in the chat where you can actually support me. So let's see, we're gonna do this. Oh, and I'm gonna tweet out that I'm live. Tweet it out. Alright, let's see. Go to... So yeah, I'm just gonna show how you guys can support me if you would like to. Yikes. If you don't want to support me on Float, you could do that, or you could just go to my website, where I have a Patreon and I have a donate. So I'm going to put the donate. Yikes, that didn't work. Alright, let's try this again. No, copy it. There we go. If I knew how to computer, it'd be better. You guys know what I'm talking about. Alright, so I'm going to put a link right here in the flute. And this is where you could help me out on PayPal if you'd like to. There's also a Patreon link there on that website, so check that out. Just want to get everything straight here. Okay. And the last thing I want to say is that if you're watching me and you aren't on Float, so if you're somebody who saw me on Facebook or Twitter post this and you're not on Float, I want you to consider joining Float, because it's great, because it's free speech, right? So you could say whatever you want, so you could get on here and talk about whatever we want, which is going to be, I'm going to be talking about some stuff that might offend some people, but hey, what are you going to do? The other thing is they have encrypted messaging, which is great, right? So if you want to, I don't know, whatever you want to do, if you want to send it encrypted, you don't have to worry about people looking at it. You know, if you want to send naked pictures of yourself, I guess, or whatever, if you're, I don't know, if you're selling weed, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not advocating that you should do any of these things because, you know, they're illegal, but it's your right, so do what you want. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about. And today, like I said, I'm going to be talking about some current events. And I had a podcast recently where I talked about how I feel like I wanted to kind of compare if we're our situation now to end times, and are we in end times? Because I remember throughout my whole life, everybody's always said it's the end of the world, right? There was... let's see, Y2K was supposed to be the end of the world. Then 2001, it was the millennium. That was the end of the world. Then the Mayans was the end of the world. Before that, there's like some stuff in the 80s. I mean, it's always the end of the world. But I think that was kind of the negative use of this. I think there might be something we can gain. So if you're not familiar with Sodom and Gomorrah, it's a pretty popular story in the Bible. I learned about it when I was younger, and they kind of use it, you know, to scare people. But basically what happens is there was a couple of cities that God just was not happy about the way that people were living there, and so he basically was going to destroy it. And let's see, I'm going to bring you down to judgment upon Sodom and Gomorrah. Here we go. The story of the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah is told in Genesis. 3 men come to Abraham in the plains of Mamre. Let's see, Abraham. So basically what happens is Abraham's trying to advocate for these cities, and he's saying, you know, don't kill them, don't kill them. And God goes, well, if you could find me righteous men, I think he starts with like 100, and then he keeps going down, and finally they come to 1. And it turns out to be this guy Lot, who's the only person in the entire place that's actually living morally. So they sent some angels down there, and right here, 2 angels are sent before them to meet Abraham's nephew Lot, and he convinces them to hang out. But before they do, a bunch of men come and they want to round him up, and they say, "Send me him out. We want to know your men." And then people also have translated this to say, "We want to have sex with them." So like these guys wanted to come and like rape these other men, and Lot refused, and he said, "No, I'll send out my virgin daughters instead." And the crowd said, "No, we won't deal with that." So I'm going to get into that a little bit later with the esoteric interpretation, I think, of this might be. So this is just kind of an overview, obviously. And then, so like presto magic change, like something you would see, like they throw a flashbang grenade, these angels, and then everyone gets out of there and the city's destroyed. And the angels warn them not to turn around. And Lot's wife Sarah does, and she turns into a pillar of salt. So you probably heard of that story, okay? So like I said, I'm going to get into the esoteric breakdown. Next, we're going to look at another story, and this one is, here's a picture of Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, I mean, not a picture, but you know what I'm saying. It's an artist rendering. I went back in time in my time machine, and I took a picture of Sodom and Gomorrah. Let's see, I'm just kind of checking things out here. All right. How's everyone doing? I'm still looking at the chat, so if you want to throw something in there, I will address it. All right, so now we're going to shift gears a little bit and head over to Hinduism, which is another pretty popular world religion, I would imagine. A bunch of people believe in this. Okay, so what I want to look at here is the Kali Yuga, which is also known as the Dark Age. So in Hinduism, the Kali Yuga is the last of the 4 stages the world goes through as part of a cycle of yugas. Described in Sanskrit scriptures, the other ages are called... Okay, so the other ages doesn't really matter. The Kali of Kali Yuga means strife or discord, quarrel or contention. The Kali Yuga is associated with the demon Kali. So if you remember Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, he's like, "Kali, I'll see you in hell." So that's where you might be familiar with that. That's the first time I ever heard of it. Not to be confused with the goddess Kali. Okay, so that's a little different. All right, so I just wanted to kind of give you an idea. So they believe, the Hindus right now believe we're in the Dark Age. So I want to bring you down here to some of the attributes to see if this sounds familiar. Hindus believe, here we go. Hindus believe that human civilization degenerates spiritually during the Kali Yuga. Common attributes and consequences are spiritual bankruptcy, mindless hedonism, breakdown of all social structure, greed and materialism, unrestricted egotism, afflictions and maladies of the mind and body. So that sounds pretty familiar, maybe, right? All right, so we'll get back to that in a little bit. I just kind of wanted to show you that. And then there's some prophesized events, too, that we'll probably touch on a little later, but I just want to show you what they prophesized to come. It says, rulers will become unreasonable. They will levy taxes unfairly. Rulers will no longer see it as their duty to promote spirituality or to protect their subjects. They will become a danger to the world. Does this sound familiar to anybody? People will start migrating, seeking countries where wheat and barley form the staple food source. All right, so like I said, we're going to get back to this. I just kind of wanted to touch on this a little bit and get you guys up to speed on a couple different ideas of what we might be talking about here to outline this. This is the prophecy of Hermes. All right, so what I'm going to do here is, this is a video. I'm going to turn it way up. I'm going to go to the chat first before we keep going. Oh, okay, so it says, I am ex-military myself. I'm wondering how old you are. That's it's one of my jokes as a comedian. Like, people never know how old I am. I either look like I look like really good for 40 or like really terrible for 16. That's my joke. Like, I've been a 16-year-old that's been smoking for 40 years. I am 43, and I was in the United States Marine Corps. USMC active duty from 94 to 98. There we go. Okay. All right. So next, like I said, we're going to be talking about the prophecy of Hermes, and this is, I wanted to start at 56 seconds. Okay. So this is an esoteric, like I said, teaching. This is Hermes. Hermes was like Mercury, Thoth, you might have heard of. He was supposed to be one of the gods who's supposed to help humans when nobody else wanted to.
There will come a time when it will have been in vain that Egyptians have aspired to the ways of higher beings in heartfelt piety and service. All our holy worship will become powerless and pointless. The higher beings will return to the heavens. Egypt will be left and forgotten, and the land desolate, with not one of the ancient deities remaining. O Egypt, Egypt, of thy religion nothing will remain but an empty tale, which in time even your own people will not believe. Nothing will be left but words engraved on stone, and only the stones will speak of your piety. And in that day, people will be tired of life, and they will cease to think of the universe as something worthy of reverence and wonder. People will no longer love the world around them, this incomparable work of the Creator, this glorious structure, this totality of good comprising so many diverse forms, this instrument through which the Creator operates in everything he has made, freely favoring human welfare. This combination and accumulation of all the manifold things that call forth the veneration, praise, and love of the beholder. Darkness will be preferred to light, and death will be thought more profitable than life. No one will raise their eyes to the heavens. Good, spiritual people, seekers of truth, will be considered insane. The vulgar and careless will be considered wise. The madman will be thought a strong man, and the wicked will be held up as good.
It's like upside down world.
As for the soul, and the belief that we are immortal beings, or that we may hope to attain to immortality, as I have taught you, people will consider it a joke, and even convince themselves that it is false. No word of reverence or piety, no utterance worthy of heaven, will be heard or believed. And so the higher beings will depart from mankind, a grievous thing. Only those who bring evil messages will remain. They will mingle with humans and push them towards all kinds of recklessness and crime, into wars and theft and frauds, and all things hostile to the bodies and souls of human beings. Then will the earth tremble and the sea bear no ships. Heaven will not support the stars in their orbits. All voices of the gods will be forced into silence. The fruits of the earth will rot, the soil will turn barren, and the very air will sicken with sullen stagnation. All things will be disordered and out of kilter. All good will disappear.
So that sounds pretty, let me bring it back to me here. Sounds pretty glim, sounds pretty gloomy. So some of these, what they're saying, kind of echo what's going on in the world right now, and that's what I want to kind of bring us to right now, the present moment, and what's going on these days, what's going on in the world. And we're going to do that right now. I'm going to bring us back here. That's a pretty cool picture, but we're going to come to here. Here is, this is Ron Paul. And I love this. This is the Liberty Report. It comes out every weekday at about noon. He does it live, him and Daniel McAdams. And you can check it out on YouTube at the Liberty Report. Now, a lot of these videos I'm just going to have speed up. So they're going to be at like 1.25 times. Just so we can get through them. And like I said, make sure you check out this whole video. I'm just going to show you some clips and then comment on it. But it's really worth it to go and check out. I'll leave the links. What I'm going to do is when I put this up live, I'm going to put all the links in it. And we're going to talk about right now is economics and how everything is going economically in the world.
So Chris, I'm sure you've been looking at this and looking at how the markets are going, and it looks like it's been rocky and gold has been challenged. And I think that we have to keep a close eye on all the markets.
That's right, Dr. Paul, and I agree with you 100% on coronavirus just being a fuse to what we've been talking about for years. Here's a breaking news. The coronavirus did not create the stock market bubble. The Federal Reserve did. And we've been talking about that over and over, telling people that this is very bad what they're doing because they manipulate the economy. They manipulate money. They counterfeit money. And prices are the lifeblood of the economy. Prices are supposed to tell us the truth about supply and demand for every resource in the economy. People make economic decisions, investments based on prices. When they're a lie, you're making bad decisions. Now, when they tell the truth, they're still going to be bad decisions, but they're not going to be a gigantic bubble like they are now. And that's what the Fed has created. By interfering with interest rates, by counterfeiting money, they've turned the economy into a carnival funhouse or a house of mirrors. You don't know what decisions to make. You have companies out there that don't make money, don't know if they're ever going to make money, and that's just fine. Just like during the dot-com bubble. That's what they do. But because there's economic activity, the president walks around saying this is the greatest economy ever. No, it's the greatest distortions ever. And distortions have to be corrected. And that's when the financial crisis comes to correct all of these mistakes that the Federal Reserve has engendered.
Right, and things like you've just talked about can go on a long period of time. And although, Austrian economics teaches us how to anticipate it and spot a bubble, others, Keynesians, say, you never know when there's a bubble. But Austrian economics teaches you can't spot them. But they also teach that you don't know exactly how big it'll be, how much it will last, and how people will react, and what the central banks will do, and what the politicians will do, and all sorts of things. And what will the effect of, a viral scare that's going to wipe out half the population of the earth. All these kinds of things are involved.
So basically, Ron Paul and Chris Rossini talk about this every Friday, and they're talking about how that the coronavirus scare might light the fuse, but it's not what is going to cause the economic fallout. They're saying that there's been this bubble, and they've been talking about it forever, and they're not sure when it's going to bust because you can't really ever tell when the bubble's going to bust. So that's that. But what we're going to do now is go to this next video clip. Right here. Oh, there we go. Brave. All right. So this guy is Peter Schiff. If you're not familiar with him, he's very, very knowledgeable. And he was one of these guys who kind of predicted the crash in 08. So let's hear. This is kind of what they were talking about before 08.
Kudlow defense now. By February and March, on CNBC in those days, I did go to the recession call. So I will plead that I did see it. I don't know that anybody saw that kind of crash. But look, this is not then. This is not Peter Schiff. Today was a big day for stocks, number one. And number two, the leaders were the commodity-type stocks, the cyclical stocks, one could say the inflation stocks. Will it continue?
I don't even think it was a big day for the market in general. I mean, the Dow lost value today priced in gold. Maybe it held its own priced in.
So this is Peter Schiff back before the 08 crash, kind of just trying to, look at how young he looks. This is crazy. Just trying to let people know what's going to happen. And why I wanted to show this was because this other guy just keeps saying, oh, no one could see it coming, but then they just keep showing clips of him telling
oil. It was coming. But, I think you said it right at the first part of the program, that inflation is a monetary phenomenon. And, money supply and credit has been going through the roof for the past decade. For a while it went into the stock market, and then that bubble burst, and it went over into the real estate market. And now that bubble has burst.
Right. And how long do you reckon that can last before that does some serious damage to the economy?
Well, it's already done. Look, the damage has already been done. The U.S. economy is already deindustrialized, basically. We're on life support from foreign central banks. I mean, if we were a stock, we'd already be broke.
All right, pretty gloomy. I appreciate it. I don't know that anybody saw that kind of crash.
Why do you think that a recession is coming? Just how bad is it going to be?
I think it's going to be pretty bad, and whether it starts in 07 or 08, I think is immaterial. And I also think it's going to last not just for quarters, but for years. See, the basic problem with the U.S. economy is we have too much consumption and borrowing and not enough production and savings. And what's going to happen is the American consumer is basically going to stop consuming and start rebuilding his savings, especially when he sees his home equity evaporate. And when you have the economy 70% consumption, you can't address those imbalances without a recession. Rather than the recession being resisted, it should really be embraced, because the disease is all this debt-financed consumption. The cure is that we...
All right, so basically it just keeps going on like that. So he's giving you... He's kind of trying to sound the warning. Now, that was before 08, and then we all know what happened. And then there was some new stuff here, though, that I like this video because he talks about it. Before I start that, though, I'm just going to check in the chat and see if there's anything. No, all right, it says whatever I did helped. So, all right, we make it work here at morelawsmoreproblems.com. I'm Brandon Smith. We make it work. We put headphones on microphones if we have to. Whatever we got to do. All right, so... Back to Peter Schiff, and this is him just January 30th, 2020, so like a month ago talking.
I'm much better than the economy. Yeah. Well, if you read the press clippings, you'd say that we had the best economy of all time. Well, how do you square that?
Well, you have to believe that. I mean, Trump is trumpeting that, right? That's his political line because he wants to be reelected. So he wants to pretend that we have the greatest economy ever. Now, I think Wall Street has a vested interest in perpetrating that false narrative because it helps get people to buy overpriced stocks, right? That's their business. They want people buying the market. So believing that the economy is great is one way to kind of justify these record high multiples. In fact, last year, corporate earnings actually declined slightly, yet the stock market was up about 30%. And so that shows you that it's more perception than reality. If we really had a booming economy, then corporations would be earning more money. But they're not. They're earning less. And so it's all just a figment of people's imaginations. But unfortunately, it's going to end very badly.
Did you ever envision a Dow 30,000?
Well,
yeah, so there he goes. It's going to end very badly. So now he's kind of saying the same thing, not the same exact message, but pretty much the same thing he was saying back in 06, 07. So I'm just kind of trying to give you guys an idea of what's going on with the economy and how these guys, they saw it coming before. Oh, look at my lovely hair. They saw it coming before, and they're trying to sound the warning now. So this is one aspect where you might say where it's a current event and it seems like it's going to be the end or something bad because they keep talking about how it might be a really bad financial collapse because of what's going on, because essentially the central bank, the Fed, is just printing money and shoving it into the system, and we all know that's not going to end well. And that's why I think a lot of people on float are really interested in crypto, which is good. People are interested in gold and silver, I think, which is good. Obviously, I'm not giving financial advice because I have no idea. These are just things I heard, and I'm repeating back to you guys. So let's keep going. What's the next thing I want to talk about? Well, I think other than the economy, the next thing we talk about is war, because that's really what affects the economy, especially here. So here's something that came out. This was, let me put it on the screen. There we go. This is a video that came out in 2017, but this is just a little video that shows, it's like an animation that shows where all the troops are stationed. And this has actually been updated. It's a little worse than what we wrote last. This is just as of 2017. Idea. Here's another one that's a little more updated. This is from a mainstream source, I guess you could say, quote unquote, the Washington Post. So I guess take it for whatever it's worth. Grain of salt, right? I don't want to sign up, guys. Okay, so this is, see where I was showing you, it says 14,000 in Afghanistan, and we're supposed to be drawing back from that. That's just something we signed, but we're gonna get there. And yeah, so this just kind of gives you an idea with the Middle East. Like I said, I'm going to put these links in with you. This is a little one. This is from about a year ago. And it just kind of shows, you can download this, and it shows that there's 40 military bases, 65 counterterrorism training facilities, 26 military exercises, 14 troops in combat, and 7 air and drone strikes. All right, so that was the counterterrorism activity for 1 year between 2017 to 2018. So that's pretty cool to check out. And then we're going to go back to the Ron Paul report, obviously, because that's mostly what he talks about, is foreign policy. And this is, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with what's going on with Syria right now, Syria and Turkey. So a quick breakdown of what's going on. There's been a civil war in Syria for since Obama. And the United States is in there ostensibly to get rid of ISIS, I guess, and we were in there to try to help out. But there's two sides. So you have the Syrians, and then you have the quote-unquote rebels who were either Al-Qaeda or ISIS, Al-Nusra, however you want to look at them. And it really looks like the U.S. is funding them, or was funding them, or was helping them out, was trying to get rid of them, but then not exactly. I mean, ISIS is pretty much a U.S. proxy force. If you're not familiar with this, there's a lot of evidence you can look into it. So you have that going on. Now, what's going on is most of that was it's all set, right? ISIS was really contained to Idlib. And Turkey is now there fighting alongside the rebels, the moderate rebels, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, whatever you want to call them. And Syria is trying to get it back from them. So they're actually there's some combat going on, and there's been some troops dying. So this is what that's the context where we're going to come in here. And this is, again, Daniel McAdams.
Taught us that no matter who's elected, as Tom Woods said, no matter who you vote for, you get John McCain, So Trump is essentially continuing the policy of Obama, which is Assad must go. He's not saying it himself out of his mouth, but the people who work for him, that is their policy. That is the interagency policy, which can't be changed. And that is why we're in trouble. That's why we're probably closer to war with Russia than at any time since the end of the Cold War. Because obviously we want Assad to go. The Russians have been backstopping Assad since 2015, when, as you mentioned in your opening, he was on the ropes. The jihadists almost took over Syria, and then they got help. The reason why we're talking about it now, as you said, is that over the past couple of weeks, the Syrian army has made dramatic gains in Idlib province, which even U.S. officials admit is the last bastion of Al-Qaeda.
So that's what I'm talking about now. So the Syrians are basically trying to take back the rest of their country, and they're trying to liberate it. And it's being talked about in different ways. A lot of people are trying to demonize what Syria is doing, but they're actually in their own country. And I'm going to show you some video of, next we're going to get into some video of some land or some territory that was freed from the quote-unquote rebels. And now it's back in the hands of Syria, and you can see how they treated it. It's pretty crazy.
In Syria. This is the last area. This is where they all escaped to when they left the other parts of Syria. This is where they are. But the Turks don't
And they're talking about Idlib, which is not too far from Turkey.
Want to let go of their policy of overthrowing Assad, like we don't. And so what they did is they actually embedded Turkish troops in with jihadists in Syria. So this whole thing blew up on Thursday when Syrian government and maybe even Russian airstrikes ended up killing about 34 Turkish soldiers inside of Syria, fighting against the Syrian army. The Turks are acting as if they're the aggrieved ones, just like we're in Syria. They're in Syria without being requested. So they're saying, "Oh no, this is terrible. We got our guys killed. We need to have some Patriot missiles." NATO, they call the NATO meeting. We need help. We need help. So this is what we're talking about now. And the administration, the State Department, well, hey, let's give them whatever they need. And the Pentagon saying, wait a minute, there are some implications for this that we need to think about.
So a few months.
Daniel McAdams is just letting you know what's going on, and how they kind of try to they obfuscate it. And then Ron Paul, I'm gonna bring this up a little bit forward where Ron breaks in. I like what he says right here. Like I said, go back and check out this whole video. It was just put up. It's on the Ron Paul report. You can go check it out. This was from March 2nd, 2020.
The bad part, though, is that Trump's position had been one that we could support. Let's come home, let's leave, and started leaving until he said, well, but we can't just leave the oil, so we have to stay. And he was talking into keeping some troops there, and I thought he could sit back and this whole thing would be settled, but that wasn't likely to happen. And so he's sympathetic, with probably giving the weapons to Turkey, for diplomatic reasons. So
yeah,
and he's not going to help Assad.
No. And stepping back a little further, why is this happening? Why are we talking about Idlib? Of course, the U.S., the neocons that run Washington are acting as if, once again, as if Assad just got a wild hair and decided to start killing a bunch of civilians, or even as U.S. officials admit that it's Al-Qaeda that runs the place.
Like he said, Al-Qaeda runs the place, so I want to go to one more spot.
Yes. But what's happening is the Turks, of course, after they lost this 34 troops, they went all out. They started firing like mad. They say they killed 2,000 Syrian troops. I think that's probably, most people think that's exaggerated.
So the Syrians they attacked and they killed 33 to 34 Turkish troops, and now the Turkish people, this is what he's saying, the Turks said that they retaliated and killed like 2,000 Syrians, but who really knows what happens? That's what he's saying. No, and the Syrians are saying no one died. So, but this is what we're talking about. So this is kind of where I'm getting you in the context of war, what's going on in Syria right now. And the reason I'm talking about this is because there's superpowers that are involved are Syria and Russia are on one side, and then on the other side it's it seems like to be Al Qaeda in Turkey. And the problem with that is Turkey is a NATO country. So Turkey's part of NATO, and if they're going to be fighting with Syria and Russia, it could have really bad implications.
But what they're doing is that they're firing these multiple launcher rocket systems from Turkish soil into Syria and killing Syrian army troops.
So they're firing from Turkey into Syria to cover their troops that are in Syria. So the Turks are not only invading Syria, but they're also covering their guys from Turkey.
MLRSs. And that is devastating right now to the Syrian army that's operating there, and they're in Turkish soil. And as Colonel Pat Lang wrote, normally what you would do, and you could do it literally simultaneous instantly, is determine these batteries where they are and hit them back before they can move. But it becomes a little more complicated because they're in Turkey. So if Syria fires into Turkey and knock out some batteries, would that trigger Article 5? Could the Turks say, hey, listen, Syria's attacking us, they're attacking our soil? And so it makes it very difficult that Turkey is basically hiding behind its borders.
Talking about Article 5 here is, under NATO, Article 5, we're supposed to treat anybody like it's our own soil. So what he's saying is he's worried if the Syrians attack or if the Russians attack the spots that are in Turkey that are covering their troops that are in Syria, they're afraid that they might try to call for these Article 5 coverages, which then we're going to have to like back them up, and then we're going to have to like go to war with Russia, is what they're worried about.
And it's a big deal. Would Europe go to war against Russia for a Turkey that they've not been really thrilled about anyway for a long time? And the other question would be, would Russia continue to back Syria if this happened? If Turkey wanted an Article 5 statement last week, and NATO's they gave them some positive words but didn't want to go there. But if this does happen, if you do start knocking out some of these batteries in Turkey, which normally you would do because it is an act of war for Turkey to fire into Syria, it's like, you punch someone in the face and they punch you back and you claim that you're the aggrieved party here. But there are a lot of real big question marks, and it is pretty serious. And I think that's why we're trying to talk about it a little bit today. Right. It's a big issue.
Yeah, so like I said, he's making a really good point where he's worried that it's just another step toward war. And if you look at everything that's going on right now, I argue that if you looked back at the events that are going on right now, even since like the Iranian Revolution, the 70s, 80s, maybe even the 90s, when we looked at the Gulf War I with George H.W. Bush, if you look back, say, 500 years from now on those events, they definitely could be considered steps toward a world war, or even the beginning of the world war. We could be in the world war right now, and we just don't realize what's going on. I mean, if these steps progress further and it does end up in a war, they're going to look back at this time. What are they going to say? This is a time of peace? No, the United States is occupying. I just showed you all that map of what the United States is occupying. So I argue that we could be in a world war right now and just not even know it. All right, I'm not trying to be too negative with you guys. I'm just saying, this is possible. Now, what I'm going to go to now is Vanessa Beeley, who is, let's see, Brave Browser, that one, there we go. Vanessa Beeley is a reporter. She's a British reporter who is in Syria, and she has this video of, now it says right here, former Nusra Front Military Training Center, suspected by white helmets also. So the white helmets are also the ones who are helping out these moderate, quote-unquote moderate rebels, but it's been already proved that it's al-Nusra, it's al-Qaeda. So what happened was the Syrian army came through this whole area and retook it, and they found this training camp, and so they went inside the training camp. And check out this video. I don't think there's much sound. They're just kind of looking. Let's see. Maybe we can skip ahead.
A military training center everywhere in this area in Sarakab.
Oh, here we go.
And then in this building, which would be used actually for civil defense.
So she's a British reporter, like award-winning reporter, Vanessa Beeley. Check her out on Twitter, and she's
training. As you can see, the climbing of the building, which is similar to the other civil defense training centers I've seen. We have the chemical lab, as it appears to be. If you go inside, you have
Yikes. Looks like they're cooking meth. But yeah, I shouldn't laugh because they're probably making like terrible chemical weapons and shit, or just, you know, look, there's BBs and stuff down there, so it's all shrapnel. Who knows? Probably making landmines and just all kinds of crazy stuff. Oops.
So these are the so-called moderates and white helmet associates in Sarakeb, Idlib.
Yeah, so these are supposed to be the moderates and the white helmets, right? All right, so now there's actually something from today that I'm going to add into this whole presentation, because I set this up yesterday. But there's a video in Ron Paul's, I know I keep going back to him, but I'm telling you, I watch a lot of different stuff, but for what I want to talk about today, Ron Paul was really on point with some of the stuff he's been talking about lately. And this is, so we're shifting gears now, moving from Syria to Afghanistan. It's a much different situation, obviously, than what's going on in Syria. What's going on in Syria, what's going on in Afghanistan, it happened because of 9/11. If you're not very familiar, I'll give you the quick rundown. 9/11 happened. We said the Taliban was providing a safe harbor for Al-Qaeda, who attacked us, so we went in there promptly and overthrew the Taliban, and we've been in there since 2001. So we've been in there, you know what, coming up on 19 years this year. So the Afghan papers just came out, said everything was a lie, so we should have been out of there. You know, we wasted trillions of dollars. So that's basically where we sit with Afghanistan. So, and now I don't know if you guys know or heard, but they've just signed a peace agreement that we're supposed to be pulling out, and that's what they're going to be talking about. So let's go back to the old Liberty Report.
This virus and the Democrats scoring political points. And I also think there certainly is a political component, even though we'll take it when we can get it, there's a political component to the president wanting to have this deal inked with the Taliban. And as you point out, it's pretty obvious what's going on here when the Afghan government is not even involved in the talks. You know, here's your deal, take it or leave it. But, you know, John Glazer wrote in the Cato Institute website, I think today or yesterday, and he makes a good point. You know, very sadly, this deal could have been made under Bush.
That's a really good point. I don't want to just gloss over that. They're saying that the deal they're making today, they could have made it under George Bush, who was the president, you know, up until 2007 or 8. So they could have done this years ago.
The Taliban agree to stop attacking U.S. and foreign forces. They agree that they will not allow Al-Qaeda or any terror group to use its territory to conduct terrorism against the U.S. or its allies. The U.S., in this is just a broad brush, will in turn reduce its troops from 13,000 to 8,600 in 135 days. That's pretty quick. And then the rest will leave within 14 months. So we're looking at complete withdrawal of U.S. troops by just over a year from now if everything holds. The only thing is that there are some fine print issues that we're going to talk about today that are a little bit concerning. And one of those are what Pompeo has admitted. We got some secret annexes.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, so we don't have to talk about that. That's obviously it's really more complicated. But what I wanted to highlight was that first thing I said about Bush, 15 years ago. The other thing I want to talk about was the deal. You heard that deal. We're basically pulling out, and we also have to not, end all our sanctions. We have to recognize the Taliban government. I'm not sure if I let all that stuff play. But what this means is that we lost the war. The United States government lost that war. We're just pulling out. The Taliban won. We are, they're the ones that are making the, what do you call it? On the end of a war? I can't think of the word. Not the concessions, but they're making the terms. We're following their terms. We're escaping on their time. Now, I mean, I'm not really I like to be optimistic, but I'm not as optimistic that they just think it's over, and then they're just gonna pull out, and then everything's gonna be fine, and nothing's gonna happen. It's a long time, 14 months between now. Now, the problem with any war And when we have when any country or any nation or any empire has a lot of different wars overseas or over in foreign lands, what happens is these wars start to come back home. And that's, I argue, what is going on right now. Looks like the chat is still down, so I'm just going to go to the next video. So now we're going to be talking about the war on drugs. And this guy, if you're not familiar, this is Freeway Ricky Ross. So you might have heard of the rapper Rick Ross. Well, this is where he got his name from. And I'm going to play, this is a video from World Alternative Media. I highly suggest them. If you guys aren't following them, they're on. This is the reason why how I found out about Float was through Josh Searson. So check out Josh, check out World Alternative Media. And I'm going to play a piece of his video right here because I love it so much. And then, like I said, watch this whole thing because it's great.
Yeah, man, I want you to tell our audience, for those that aren't yet aware, about a bit of your background story and your story dealing drugs and kind of
a drug dealer. I deal legal marijuana now.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background story going back a little while? And
again, I have these videos sped up, so it's a little fast.
Kind of what got you into it? And
of course I can. Poverty got me into it. I was running from poverty. I didn't like being broke. I didn't like my mom not having windows in the house, and I didn't like rats and roaches, dirty carpet. Holes in the floor, leaking kitchen cabinets. I didn't like none of that, you know. I started playing tennis at 12, and tennis kind of took me out of the ghetto, you know, because I was pretty good. Not great, but I was good. Where, like, when I was 16 in high school, they would pay me $20 an hour to go and play with some of the top juniors that eventually turned pro, you know, who parents were raising them in. And I was able to go to these elaborate houses, and I would get to ride in the Mercedes-Benz, the Rolls-Royce, and they would drop me back off in the ghetto. And I was like fighting with Beverly Hills, the ghetto, Sherman Oaks, you know, like the ghetto. And I was like, I want some of that. I want to be in Beverly Hills. I want to be in Sherman Oaks. I don't want to live in the ghetto.
And you made some pretty good money.
Yeah, well, I started at 19 years old. I started with $125, and my partner had $125. Before I got arrested, I had days that I made as much as $3 million. The prosecutor said I made at least $1 million a day for 2 years. So I made quite a bit of money. But what I found out, the genius in the whole situation was that a person without a high school diploma, with no formal education, could take $250 and turn it into $1 million a day, and sometimes $3 million a day. That was amazing. And when I was doing it, I didn't think it was amazing. It was only after, when I was in prison, I learned how to read and write at 28 years old, and I started to read all of these great books, you know. And when I
learned to read until he was 28 years old, and he was making millions.
Started to read those books, I started to see the principles that I was using in some of their game plans as well.
Well, I mean, it shows that you were a very good businessman, obviously, to make that kind of money in that kind of business. And obviously, there's a lot.
So this is the drug war, and this guy ended up working with, I think he talks about it right here. He talks about he worked with the CIA.
Yeah, do you bump into government often when you
bump into him? Huh? Well, you know, first of all, my informant, who was also my drug supplier, was from Nicaragua. He was the Minister of Agriculture, if I say it right. You know, now y'all know if you go and look at my paperwork, they might say I'm retarded, because I didn't do well in school at all.
All the best people didn't do too well in school.
Maybe it's something about our school system, huh? Yeah. So this guy was the Minister of Agriculture for Nicaragua. They had a civil war going on in Nicaragua where the Russians was on one side and the U.S. was on one side. It's like, what is that? The war they got going on right now. We got the big thing about Bush and holding out the funds. It's something about wars and politics and money that it always creates a stink, if you know what I mean. Well, Russia's on one side, America's on one side. So the guys that America was backing was dirty. They were killing people, raping women. So Congress, you know, is a group.
This is all stuff that was going on in the 80s in Central America. So he's saying that the people that the CIA was backing was killing people, raping women, going crazy.
For people when they looked into it and had a conscience and said, you know, how can we back a guy that is raping and killing kids and doing all this here? We can't do it. So they cut off funds. Russia gave the Sandinistas $100 million to go get them. Like, y'all go get them. Now, Ronald Reagan and George Bush, in their minds, says, if we lose this war, Russia's really going to be in our backyard. They already got Cuba. Now they're going to have Nicaragua. They're going to be on our continent. They could be marching down the streets of America. We're going to do whatever we can. I mean, Reagan has a video where he said he'll always be a Contra. Well, they allowed these guys to start bringing cocaine in exchange for money and drugs and to make this war, because they needed the money to come from a source that Congress couldn't know because it was illegal.
So they were funding a war in Central America by bringing in drugs and selling them on our streets and using the money from our citizens. Not like it's not bad enough that they, that they tax us to death. Now they're bringing in drugs, crack, and cocaine, and getting everybody's last hard-earned dollar to use it to fund these wars. So it's, same thing. It's war. Right? It's coming home. It's what happens. I had a story up here, but I'm not sure what happened to it. It was about, it was kind of sad anyway. Maybe it's a good thing I didn't bring it up, but it was just about a couple who last year, maybe it was a year or two ago, they were accused. Somebody thought they were dealing drugs, so the police had a no-knock raid. And turns out the couple was just selling a little bit of weed on the side, but they had guns because the guy was a Vietnam vet. So, the cop shot his dog, shot the lady, shot him, killed them all in a standoff, and then tried to cover it up. It's just stuff like that. Everyone's got a SWAT team now. What do they say? The Board of Education or whatever, Department of Education has SWAT teams, they're saying now. Yeah. All right. Well, that's where we are in the war department. So we covered economics, we covered war, and what could be next? I'm going to give you a hint. I'm just going to play this, and then you guys can try to figure it out.
CO2 is warming the planet. And the equation on CO2 is actually a very straightforward one. If you sum up the CO2 that gets emitted, that leads to a temperature increase. And that temperature increase leads to some very negative effects. The effects on the weather, perhaps worse, the indirect effects in that the natural ecosystems can't adjust to these rapid changes, and so you get ecosystem collapses. Now, the exact amount of how you map from a certain increase in of CO2 to what temperature will be and where the positive feedbacks are, there's some uncertainty there, but not very much. And there's certainly uncertainty about how bad those effects will be, but they will be extremely bad. I asked the top scientists on this several times, do we really have to get down to near zero? Can't we just, cut it in half or a quarter? And the answer is that until we get near to zero, the temperature will continue to rise. And so that's a big challenge. It's very different than saying, we're a 12-foot high truck trying to get under a 10-foot bridge and we can just sort of squeeze under. This is something that has to get to zero. Now, we put out a lot of carbon dioxide every year, over 26 billion tons. For each American, it's about 20 tons. For people in poor countries, it's less than 1 ton. It's an average about 5 tons for everyone on the planet. And somehow we have to make changes that will bring that down to zero. It's been constantly going up. It's only various economic changes that have even flattened it at all. So we have to go from rapidly rising to falling and falling all the way to zero. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra. But let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3. New vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
All right, so if you haven't guessed it, we're not going to be talking about climate change, but we are going to be talking about the coronavirus, about plague, pestilence, right? We talked about economics, we talked about war. Next, it's going to be pestilence, but first, we're going to take a little break. Boom, there we go. All right, you can check me out. Obviously, you're watching Float right now, so you can check me out on Float. You can also check me out on Twitter, Brandon Smith 203, on Instagram, Brandon John 3. My website is morelawsmoreproblems.com. I make memes. I do a blog post. I've been posting on my blog since 2013. You can go on there. I have articles about my time in the Marine Corps, all kinds of stuff. My views have changed a lot, so you can see the progression of my views. I put up videos up there. I also do my podcast, which is the Brandon Bonanza, and my other website, which I should have put up there, was comedylol.com, and that's where you can find the website, which is where the podcast website is, and you can also support me there.